You're 32 years old, $200,000 in cash stuffed inside a gym bag that smells like mildew, and 3 countries are actively trying to kill you at the same time. The helicopter circling above the roof? Not Amazon Prime. The footsteps in the hallway? Definitely not your neighbor heading to the ice machine. And the burner phone you bought 4 hours ago at a gas station on the outskirts of El Paso has already been tracked. You know this because that's exactly what you would have done in their position. There are exactly 8 minutes before that door comes down. How did you get here? That's the question nobody actually asks. Everyone wants to know the body count, the methods, the locations. Nobody wants to hear where this started. Because if they listened, really listened, they'd find something that would make them deeply, genuinely uncomfortable. So let's go back to the beginning. You've got time. 8 minutes is a lifetime when you know how to use them. You're born in a city the rest of the country stopped thinking about decades ago. Doesn't matter which one. Could be any of them. South Side Chicago in the 90s, East Oakland at any point ever, a Rust Belt town in Ohio, where the factory closed before you were born, and nobody bothered to tell the people still living there. The zip code changes. The story doesn't. Your dad is in federal prison before you turn 2, or he's dead, or he's physically present, but so hollowed out that his presence is somehow worse than his absence. Your mom works 2 jobs and gets home at 11 at night, smelling like grease and exhaustion. She doesn't leave. That matters. She never leaves. But she also can't be there. There's a massive difference between those 2 things, and it takes you 20 years to understand it. The neighborhood is run by other people. It always has been. At 4 years old, you don't know their names, but you know exactly who they are. They're the ones wearing gold chains when nobody else on the block can afford to buy groceries twice a week without doing the math first. They're the ones with clean rims on a street where everything else is covered in dirt and rust. And when they walk past your building, the adults around you do this thing with their eyes. This look you can't decode yet, but your body reads perfectly. A mixture of fear and respect that smells exactly like the air before a thunderstorm. You're 5 years old, and you already understand that there are 2 kinds of people in this world. Nobody explains it to you. Nobody has to. Now, most people assume that killers and serious criminals are born broken. That there's something biologically wrong with them from day one. And look, there's research that points in that direction. But those same studies also point at something a lot less comfortable. Your environment physically reshapes your brain during the first 6 years of your life. Chronic fear, normalized violence, and the absence of stable attachment figures don't just affect your mood, they rewire your neural connections at a structural level. This isn't an excuse. It's neuroscience. It's chemistry. It's what happens to a kid's brain when danger is the weather. You weren't born broken. You got broken. So slowly, so systematically, that by the time the process is finished, you can't point to the exact moment it happened. Nobody can. You're 7 years old the first time you get hit for real. Not a frustrated parent's slap. A full punch from a 12-year-old who wants the $2 and change you're carrying for the school bus. You hit the pavement. The asphalt smells like motor oil and something organic you'd rather not identify. Your jaw hurts. Your knees hurt. Your eyes are burning. What you do next defines the next 25 years of your life. You don't cry. Not in public. You get up, wipe the blood from your lip with the back of your hand, and you stare at the 12-year-old until he looks away first. You don't get the money back, but he never asks again. That night, lying in bed, you figure out something no 7-year-old should ever figure out. That fear and rage taste exactly the same. That if you stop distinguishing between them, if you just let them fuse into one thing, the result feels like control. And control in your world is the only currency that actually means anything. You spend the next 3 years practicing that. You learn to fight not because you're an aggressive kid, but because the alternative is being prey. In your neighborhood, those are the only 2 options on the menu. By 10 years old, you're doing runs for what people loosely call the organization, though nobody calls it that. They call it the business, the crew, that thing. You deliver packages, carry messages, run errands. You get paid a ridiculous amount of money for it. Ridiculous in the sense that right now, at 32, with $200,000 in a duffel bag, you'd laugh if it didn't make you want to cry. What nobody tells you is that every single errand you run is an invisible thread tightening around your neck. You can't see it because nobody says it out loud. In your world, invisible contracts are the only contracts that exist. And what comes next makes all of that look like a summer internship at a nonprofit. You're 12 years old when you see your first death. You don't cause it. You just watch. A man you recognize from the neighborhood. Someone who used to ruffle your hair when you walked past his food stand. Takes 3 shots to the chest 40 yards from where you're waiting for the school bus. It takes him 4 minutes to die. You know because you look at your watch. Not out of coldness. Out of pure neurological shock that freezes you in place and turns you into a data recording machine. The sound of gunshots doesn't sound like the movies. It sounds flat, small, absurdly insignificant for what it does. The blood on the pavement is the exact same color as the fruit punch Kool-Aid from the corner store. You can't drink fruit punch for the next 6 months. Nobody on the bus says a word about what just happened. The driver closes the doors and pulls away. You get to school. You sit down. Your teacher talks about fractions. And something in your head makes a soft, quiet click. Like locking a door to a room you don't intend to go back into. That click was your brain filing violence away, not as trauma, but as operational data. Not as something bad, as something that simply is. Forensic researchers have found that exact same pattern in the histories of nearly every major violent criminal, documented in the 20th and 21st centuries. Before you think this justifies what comes next, it doesn't. But it does explain it, and understanding how things happen is the only way to stop them from happening again. Not that anyone wants to hear that part. At 14, you have your first real conversation with someone who actually matters inside the organization. A man, mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, clean hands, expensive clothes that aren't trying too hard. The kind of guy who, in any other setting, would look like a corporate attorney having a Tuesday lunch. He takes you out to eat, orders for you without asking what you want, eats slowly, talks very little. When he does talk, what he says has a structure you immediately recognize because it's the same structure that fear has. Simple, direct, no decoration. He tells you you've been doing good work for 4 years, that people have been watching, that there's a difference between working for the business and being part of the business. He asks if you understand the difference. You say yes. It's not entirely true, but it's true enough that he nods. What he doesn't tell you, what takes years to understand, is that that conversation was the last moment in your life where you could have chosen something different. The last exit on the highway where the map still had other roads. After that, yes, the map simplifies dramatically. One road, one direction, and the only variable is how long you take to reach the end. You're 14. You eat a real meal for the first time in weeks. The man pays with 100 and doesn't wait for change. And you think, maybe this isn't so bad. It's already pretty bad. But just wait until you turn 16. At 16, you kill someone for the first time. I'm not going to dress that up with cinematic language because it doesn't deserve it, and because you yourself, decades later, can't remember it with any kind of poetic distance. You only remember the weight, the physical weight of what you're doing, which is so much heavier than you expected, and the silence afterward. A silence that isn't peace. It's the total absence of something that was always there before. What criminology consistently confirms, there are two types of responses in that first moment: guilt or dissociation. The ones who feel guilt, who can't sleep, who throw up, who fall apart, they generally don't become what you become. They get out. Or they get caught fast because guilt makes people sloppy. The ones who dissociate are different. Not because they're monsters without feelings, but because that room you locked at 12 turns out to be bigger than it looked. And it has room for more things. You sleep that night. Not well, but you sleep. And that, more than anything else, is the thing about yourself that should scare you the most. By 18, you're known inside the circles that matter. You have a reputation that functions simultaneously as armor and as a leash, because that kind of reputation requires constant maintenance. Let it go stale and it rots. Feed it too much and you grow beyond what your position can hold, which creates a whole different category of problems. You learn to calibrate. That effective violence isn't the most theatrical kind, it's the most surgical. You learn to read rooms, to identify who in any group of 10 people is carrying the most fear and why that makes them the most dangerous. You develop a specific and deeply warped emotional intelligence. Not to build connection, but to anticipate it and neutralize it before it becomes a liability. You're essentially completing a master's degree in applied psychology. Except the campus is a neighborhood with no name, and they pay your tuition in cash and other people's terror. At 21, you cross a line you didn't know existed until you're already on the other side of it. It's not the first time you've killed. It's not the first time you've ordered something serious. It's something different, something about scale and visibility. And suddenly, your name leaves the circles you've always lived in and enters other ones. Circles with badges, budgets, and servers in buildings that don't appear on any public map. Interpol opens a file with your name. You won't know about it for weeks, through a channel I can't explain to you, because if I explain it, it stops existing. Up until that moment, you were a criminal. From that moment on, you're a target. The difference is enormous, and almost nobody outside understands it. A criminal has enemies. A target has hunters. Enemies want something from you: money, power, territory, revenge. Hunters only want one thing: That's so much simpler. And in terms of threat, simplicity is terrifying because it has no blind spots. There's no negotiating with someone whose only objective is your non-existence. You change countries, change names, change your face partially through a procedure at a clinic that exists in zero official medical records and costs your organization a number I won't say out loud because it's obscene. You change routines, operational languages, contact networks. What you can't change is what you are. And what you are already has too many records, too many footprints, too many witnesses whose loyalty is purchased. And purchased loyalty has an expiration date. This is where the part starts that no movie gets right, the boring and terrifying simultaneously part. Being the most wanted person on the planet doesn't mean constant action, car chases, airport shootouts. It means 90% of your existence is waiting. Forced stillness in hotel rooms that smell like industrial cleaner, and the generic lives of 100 different strangers who passed through before you. Eating alone, never establishing any behavioral pattern, because patterns are what the algorithms are looking for, and the algorithms are now better at finding patterns than humans are. Modern facial recognition can identify you with 97% confidence from a single ear. One ear, not a full face, just your ear. You're 23 years old, and you haven't spoken to your mother in 16 months. In the silence of a hotel room at 3 in the morning, there's a constant presence. Shapeless, bodiless. That is the sum total of every resource in the world currently dedicated to finding you. You feel it, not mystically, not paranoid, with the same physical certainty as knowing someone is behind you in a parking garage, even though you haven't heard footsteps. You live inside that feeling for years. At 26, you meet someone. This wasn't in the plan. Not because love is impossible in your world, but because it's such an obvious vulnerability, so perfectly exploitable, that you've maintained a surgical distance from anything resembling attachment for years. Transactional relationships. Contact without connection. But this is different. Or you convince yourself it is. And that's the problem. Because the same brain that got so good at detecting other people's lies turns out to be completely capable of manufacturing its own when the need is desperate enough. What this person represents is the first real evidence, in over a decade, that you're a human being. Not a function, not a name on a target list. A human being with a part of them that can still want something other than survival. It's also the biggest crack in your armor. And cracks don't wait for you to be ready. At 27, the people hunting you find that crack. Gradually, with the methodical patience of intelligence operations that no time is working for them. What happens next, the movies actually get right, so I won't dwell on it. What the movies don't show is the night before. The night when you see it coming, and you have to make the most brutal decision a human being can make. Between what you love and what you are. Between what you want to preserve and what you have to sacrifice for something of you to survive. You don't sleep that night. Not from fear. Because sleeping would mean closing your eyes and losing even 1 second of the last minutes in which the world still looks like this. You're 28 years old when you officially become number one. Not because you did anything specifically different from what you'd been doing for years, but because the man who held that spot before you makes a mistake. The kind I can't describe without it sounding like a preview of your own ending. And the international classification systems move you up one slot. The number one spot. The name in the briefings on the desks of agency directors. The case study used in training programs across at least 4 continents. You know what that feels like? Exactly like before. No fanfare. No moment where the world shifts color. Just a new, cold, very concrete awareness that the resources already dedicated to finding you just multiplied by a number you don't want to calculate. That you're now a political problem as well as an operational one. That there are people in suits with defense budgets being pressured by people in better suits with bigger defense budgets to make your name disappear from those lists. The only way to disappear from the lists is to disappear yourself. You have options. None of them are good. There's one that's slightly less catastrophic than the others, and it requires doing 3 things in a specific order within the next 48 hours. You start. One of the 3 fails. Not through carelessness on your part, but because there are variables you can't control when you've spent too long making decisions that affect too many people. The entropy of the system eventually sends you the bill, and that brings you exactly here. This room. This bag. This silence that no longer has 8 minutes. Maybe 4. You've spent 16 years being smarter than almost everyone who tried to catch you. You've crossed 42 different borders on documentation that wasn't yours. You've slept in 120 countries. You've had conversations with presidents, cartel bosses, and intelligence analysts without any of them knowing exactly who they were talking to. You built a network that at its peak was moving amounts of money that would make the GDP of several mid-sized countries feel insecure. And now you're in a mid-priced hotel room in a city whose name doesn't matter, holding a bag that smells like mildew, listening to footsteps getting closer, thinking about the $2 and change you didn't get back when you were 7 years old. The body keeps the score even when the mind tries not to. Every line you crossed, every door that closed behind you, every moment you chose survival over anything else. It all added to a weight you couldn't feel because you were moving too fast for too long. You feel it now. All of it, all at once. Like submerging in ice water and your body registering the full temperature simultaneously. The footsteps in the hallway stop. Here's the truth. Nobody wants to hear about the most wanted person on the planet. There isn't one. There are hundreds, thousands across history, on every continent, in every era. Men and women who arrived at that same convergence point where their circumstances, the system, and their own choices turned them into the #1 target of the civilized world's enforcement resources. Some end with bullets. Some end with televised trials and life sentences in solitary confinement. Some end with confidential agreements that don't exist in any official record. Some end with cancer in their mid-40s because chronic stress does to the body what the hunters never managed to do. What none of them take with them is what they built. Because what they built was never real. It was structured smoke. Power that only existed as long as nobody pushed hard enough. And somebody always pushes hard enough eventually, without exception. What they do take with them is everything else. Childhood. The smell of your mom's cooking at 11 at night when she got home from work. The $2 and change you never got back. The person you pushed away because you couldn't protect them and be what you were at the same time. The dreams you probably had at 10 or 11 years old, before that room got locked, about being something else. A mechanic, a ball player, a musician, anything with a different ending than this. That's what they take. Everything else stays behind. The door gives way, light floods in, and noise, and a number of voices that only mean one thing. And in that last fragment of quiet, before everything becomes chaos, what you think about isn't the money. It isn't the organization. It isn't the lists and the files and the 16 years of being hunted. You think about your mom coming home at 11 at night, smelling like grease and exhaustion, who never left even though she could never quite be there. And you think she doesn't deserve to read your name in the papers tomorrow. But there's nothing left you can do about that. That's the last thing you think. And it turns out the last thing you think is the most human thought you've had in 15 years. That's what it means to be the most wanted person on the planet. Not the power, not the adrenaline the movies sell so well. It means living in the gap between what the world did to you and what you did with that. It means dying with $200,000 that can't buy the one thing you actually wanted, which was just to be someone who didn't end up like this. But that was simply the normal life of the most wanted person on the planet. And unfortunately for you, you were born as one. Good luck with that. That's all for today. If you want to keep living lives you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy, subscribe. And if you know a 7-year-old who just hit the pavement on a street with no name, maybe take a second to think about what you're going to do about that. Or don't. Up to you.